whether it's the trees, the ants, the soil, all of it. I came up with this hypothesis that we are God's algorithm, each one of us, in the sense that there is a predictable path, but at any moment it has free will and it can jump left to right. And it's exploring and learning and growing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's an important insight in there. Because on the one hand, we can say, if I were in those circumstances, I probably would have done the same. Mm-hmm. But that kind of gets deterministic. Like, what about choice? Mm-hmm. So I go actually to the example of quantum mechanics and the single slit experiment.
Sure.
Where you're shooting a beam of whatever, electrons or photons through an aperture, and you can predict probabilistically what the distribution will be, where the diffraction will show up on the detector screen. So there'll be, the highest density in the center, and then there'll be like this bullseye pattern, right? So in a way, it's predictable. However, from the perspective of each individual photon, it's totally unpredictable. I mean, you can predict it probabilistically. It's more likely to be in this area, and the chance of it being out here is, 0.001%, and the chance of it being way over there is 1 in a quadrillion. Right. Like, you can say that, but each one behaves, well, quantum mechanics, they call it random or acausal. Mm-hmm. But another way to say it is that each one chooses where it will go. Mm-hmm. So we could look at ourselves as the same way. We are these souls that are propelled through the aperture of our circumstances, which makes it very likely that, you are an abused child, you grow up to be an abuser yourself. Like, that's the likely place where you will land.
Yeah.
But you're not determined by that. You have choice. And what then are the conditions by which you will choose something else? And this gets into experiments with psi phenomena, where human beings can actually influence the so-called randomness of quantum random events. Mm-hmm. So there's an aspect of consciousness that, when awakened and applied, can alter the probability of, and I'm just kind of drawing a metaphor here, alter the probability of where you as a soul will end up, even subject to all of the constraints of your aperture, subject to all of the influences of your conditions that you're born into. You're not compelled by those. You're not determined by those. Mm-hmm. So looking at it, like, if you want to take like a political or social lens, I think that this understanding provides a way to unify the left-wing idea that the fate of people who are born into poverty and oppression is solely due to the system. Mm-hmm. And it kind of takes away their agency, mm-hmm. and disempowers them and makes them like these objects of charity. Mm-hmm. And then the right-wing view is like, no, they could choose something else. Mm-hmm. Don't take away their agency, don't take away their choice, don't make it easy for them just to receive handouts, right? Mm-hmm. And both of them are missing the other piece of the picture. We should definitely change the system, because the likelihood and the majority that go through this horrific aperture of poverty and addiction and so forth, they're going to end up in a very bad place. We do have to look at the system. We can't just say, oh, it's their own choice. But we also have to embrace and acknowledge and recognize that each one of these people is capable of choice, is an agent of divine volition,
Mm-hmm.
and to not reduce them to their circumstances.
Well, I mean, and you were so right, because if there are people who are born into abusive families, and one path is, well, if I was abused, I'm going to probably abuse when I get older. Or the other path is like, I was abused, I will never allow anyone else to get abused. Two very different paths that happen all the time by choice. Now, what skews them in which direction could be that programming in the factory, could be a kind word, could be a book, could be a movie, could be a story, could be another friend. There's so many things that could skew one way or the other. But there is choice. There is choice. But like you said, walk in someone else's shoes before you judge them, because if you walked in the same path, who's to say that you wouldn't have made the same choices that that person did? But there is these anomalies of like the algorithm. It kind of goes where it's going to go. And, I don't know how far you've gone down the rabbit hole in regards to soul's karma, soul blueprint, and the idea that we create the circumstances that we come into this life to learn and grow. Well, if we understand, and I've asked this to great spiritual masters, I go, well, if we wrote everything, where's free will? And the concept that that's been told to me is that there's these giant markers of things that you want to accomplish. You will get to those. Now, how you accomplish them is up to you. And you can choose not to accomplish them. That's completely your choice. But these are the things you set out to try to accomplish in this lifetime. So probability of you and me becoming astronauts or NBA players, probably not going to happen. As much as we might have wanted to early on in our lives.
What? I'm not going to become an NBA player?
I mean, I'm going to try out. I'm trying out for the Lakers next week. I don't know about you, but
yeah. So I think it's if you want to look at it from the perspective of soul blueprints and stuff, it's that the soul creates the conditions and the dilemmas and the choice points in which you exercise free will,
right,
and learn from those choices. But it does not dictate your choice in advance. Some of the situations that it creates, it's almost a foregone conclusion that you will choose something rather than something else. But what the soul creates is really what you might call the garden of forking paths.
Beautiful.
The soul creates the menu, but you make the choices. The soul creates the maze, but you choose the path.
Right.
Yeah.
But it does lean, like you said, there are certain sets of circumstances that is a foregone conclusion that you're like, it's 99% that he or she's going to walk this way. But there's still that 1% that they might go the other way. And it happens all the time.
But, and also so the way that we're looking at it is a bit simplifying, but it's also that, like, what are the conditions of the choice? And you referred to some of them earlier, like maybe that abused child did have a kindly grandmother who gave him just enough love, that he was able to take a different path. Well, we also create our own conditions by the choices that we make day to day and moment to moment of where to put our attention, that create ourselves as somebody who will pretty much automatically do something in a certain situation that looks like you're making a choice, but you're not. You're on autopilot. You've already created yourself to be the person who will pretty much automatically react in that way. One of the ways to do that is through the stories that we feed ourselves. So, for example, if you're walking around, we're constantly running a story about how rude people are and self-centered they are, and then you're out driving and someone pulls out in front of you. It's not like you're making a choice when you like lean on the horn and flip the guy the bird, and drive past. And it's like you were possessed by something. Do you really feel like you're making a choice in those moments where you just lose your shit? No, you're not making a choice then. You've already created yourself as the automatic being that will do that by the stories that you fed yourself over time, by the small choices that seem small in that moment that program you.
It's really interesting that you bring stories, because I'm not sure if you know, I come from Hollywood and filmmaking in that world. So I'm a real deep understanding of storytelling and the arcs and all that stuff and the power of story. And the stories that we tell ourselves is basically the programming of our life, is the way we look at life. So that's why the dangers of going down a rabbit hole on social media that's constantly feeding you and reaffirming these stories that if you went down the wrong path, or not the wrong path, a path that was destructive, let's say, or a story that you believe that this group is bad, and they just keep feeding you that, and that, it just reinforces it. We've never had a machine like that in the history of man that you're completely in a complete bubble. And your entire life view is, if you watch the same media, you watch this, everyone keeps saying, yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Everything's horrible. The world's ending, blah, 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 blah. I actually, just to play around, when I was on Facebook, I would start to watch and click on only positive, spiritual, like Yogananda and yogis and stuff. And I wanted to see what it would do. And it kept feeding me the good stuff. It kept feeding me more videos, more content, more things like that. I was like, oh my God, how powerful is this thing? And it's just all depends on the beginning story that you tell ourselves. So my question to you is, how can we reprogram ourselves? Which is the goal of honestly, the entire life. Like I said earlier, first 7 years you're programmed. The rest of our life, we're trying to deprogram ourselves. What advice do you have for people who are trying to change the stories? And it could be stories about love. It could be about weight. It could be about politics. It could be about money. It could be about health. It could be about everything. How do we reprogram ourselves?
Yeah. Okay. So you may have noticed when you go down one of these rabbit holes on Facebook, it could be the positive one where you're just giving yourself positive information. It could be, whatever political ideology that you keep getting confirmation bias that affirms it. You may have noticed that each of these stories, each of these belief systems that you can choose isn't just an intellectual construct, but it has a feeling quality. It corresponds to a state of consciousness. You experience yourself, you experience existence in a different way, in co-resonance with each of these stories. Like I notice when, I go down one of these doomer rabbit holes, like I feel a certain way. And I notice that even though I'm supposedly more informed about all of the horrors and problems and crises in the world, I actually end up doing much less about it because I'm missing key information. And in a way, like something similar happens if I'm only surrounding myself with light and love and pretending that certain things are not happening in this world. So I guess I tune in to what is healthy food for my spirit. And, sometimes, it's ice cream, it's cookie, it's sweet, but too much of that, and I'm going to get soft and flabby. Like sometimes I need the bitters. There's a saying by Chogyam Trungpa that I really appreciate in this regard. He says, if you can hold the pain of all the world in your heart while never lifting your gaze from the great eastern sun, then you can make a proper cup of tea. Yeah. So you have to be able to be present to all of the horrors, all of the atrocities, all of the degradation, all of the despair.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Yeah. But also be present to the joy, to the miracles, to the the power to choose. You have to be present to that too.
Mm-hmm.
If you have just the one and not the other, you're not playing with a full deck. You're not going to be able to act appropriately, which is what it means to make a proper cup of tea. We have to be able to take it all in.
Well, that's the journey of Siddhartha. I mean, that's literally the journey of Siddhartha. He lived in a castle, and he didn't even see age. And then he had missing pieces of information.
Right.
And once the reality of the world clicked in, he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I have to go on this path and figure this all out. But you're right. If you hide away in a cave and meditate for 50 years and don't understand what's going on in the world, I think that we all come down here to be part of this world and have our place in it.
Some people come down here to meditate in a cave for 50 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're doing important work too. It's just like we shouldn't take them as role models. You know,
right. If all of us did that, it'd be difficult.
Yeah. And
everyone has a path. Everyone has a path.
Yeah. It's not what I'm here to do. It's probably not what you're here to do. Most people listening, it's probably not what they're here to do. But what is yours to do? That nobody can tell you. If somebody tries to give you advice that's not, like blanket advice, general advice, here's what you're here to do, it's not going to be accurate. Only somebody who knows you so deeply and so intimately and loves you might be able to help you understand what is yours to do. But that is the question that invites the answer. Because it comes from a place of there is something that is mine to do.
Mm-hmm.
There is a beckoning, a call to which I can respond. And holding that question will attune you to opportunities to discover the answer.
Well, I mean, that's the basis of the call and the hero's journey. The hero is sitting around, and then all of a sudden there's a call to action, a call to adventure. And that's the call for what we're supposed to do. And then all the trials and tribulations. And that's probably why, for everyone listening, The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, who was able to understand myth and really brought myth into the Western world in a way that no one had ever had before. It is a complete analogy to our lives. The hero's journey is a microcosm of what we are going through. That's why it is the most powerful, popular storytelling technique to this day. It is the basis of every big blockbuster, every big story. It's always that. So,
although I think that there are other
many
storylines that are maybe becoming even more important today.
More important, yes. Popular, and there's a reason why they're popular, because they've been going around since Hamlet. They've been going around since the Epic of Gilgamesh. I mean, this concept. But yes, I agree with you. There are other storylines that should be more important than just the hero's journey. What is one of those storylines, if you don't mind me asking? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I guess it would be the stories that define other archetypes. They're kind of hard to access. But I guess there's the story of the hero's return. Like, what does a hero do after Princess Leia pins the medal on his chest?
Like, now what?
Right. But, the hero is a boy archetype. It's the culminating boy archetype. And we need man archetypes. Mm-hmm. So I think that ultimately we'll discover plot lines that are built around man archetypes and woman archetypes that are mature, which may not even be a journey. Why is it always a journey?
Well, what's interesting is I actually had the opportunity to speak to a story analyst who developed the feminine hero's journey. And it blew my mind, because it's always the male, and male's hero's journey has a lot of guy stuff that we have to work out. But I never thought about the feminine hero's journey. And she is going through so many different similar in the heroes, but the things that are happening to to the heroine is so much different, and it's mind blowing. It was just like, oh my God. And then she started showing movies of those, of the feminine. It's really fascinating.
Because it can't just be, a female switched in for the male and having the same thing. That's not what it is.
No, there's things that women, again, speaking as a male, but women have a much different journey than males do in society in general. And all of the things that they went through, and I wish I could remember them off the top of my head, but there were so many key points that were, again, lining up with the male hero's journey, but how the feminine translated that is into their own internal journey and evolution was fascinating, really fascinating.
You're kind of making me want to go back and look at some of Grimm's fairy tales and some of the mythological literature of the West and see, because there are some female main characters in those, and a lot of times there's an overlay of patriarchal values, but there's still underneath that you can sometimes perceive a much older story. So that'd be an interesting inquiry. Although I'm kind of I don't know, man. I'm right now, in this time of intensifying. Crisis, I'm kind of getting caught up in being engaged in, current affairs.
Well, let me ask you this then. What is your opinion on what effect will spirituality have and should have on the evolution of society?